So this axon produces a voltage pulse which is known as spike. Synapse. What is synapse? This thing is from the synapse. At the end of axon are highly complex. That is, each and every axon contains synapse which is responsible to store data. So in the end of axons are synapse, and after this there will be another neuron. So synapse will be in the front of another neuron. That is, this is a neuron, यहाँ एक न्यूरॉन होगा और यहाँ एक न्यूरॉन होगा. तो जो पिछले वाले के सिनेप्सिस होंगे वो इधर वाले न्यूरॉन के होंगे और जो इसके सिनेप्सिस होंगे वो इसके बाद वाले न्यूरॉन के होंगे. So each body or each dendrite faces some synapses. So at the end of axon are highly complex specialized structures called synapses, synaptic junctions that connects axon with dendritic link of another neuron. Connection between two neurons takes place at these synapses. That is, two neurons are connected through these synapses. Dendrites receive the input through synapses of the other neuron. That is, these dendrites, when they interact with the synapses of other neuron, they take some signals through these synapses, as synapses contain some stored information. The soma processes these incoming signals over time and converts that process value into output, which is sent out to other neurons through axon and synapses. This is all about the biological neuron, the parts of biological neurons, and what are the functions of these types of neurons. Neural signal processing. The key component of neural signal processing are signals from connected neurons are collected by dendrites. The cell body soma sends the incoming signals. When sufficient input is received, it generates an action potential spike. When the input is general or the input is above a threshold value, a spike is being created. If the sufficient input is not received, the input quickly decays and no action potential is generated. Timing is clearly important. The input signal must arrive together. Strong inputs will generate more action potentials per unit time. So this generation of spike solely depends on the input. So the basic idea with the soft computing was to duplicate the work of a neuron. So when we duplicated the work of a neuron, the thing was termed as artificial neuron. So basically, the structure of biological neuron was the one which was discussed earlier. Artificial neuron, if we talk about artificial neuron, we can make it as that is, with some inputs x1, x2, x3 and weights w1, w2, w3, there will be a summation of x, w, that is the work of a soma, and then the output would be created. So this is basically a structure of artificial neuron. A neuron has a set of n synapses associated with the input. Each of them is characterized with a weight. Alright, so signal is fetched over here, summation takes place over here, and output is being created. So what is the basic terminology between biological and artificial neuron? Cell, that is the cell. What was neuron? Cell. Alright, dendrites. The dendrites of a biological neuron here is being compared by the weights. So the weights act as dendrites. Soma, that is the body of the biological neuron, here act as the net input. This net input and axon as output. So this thing is acting as soma, this thing is acting as dendrites, and the output, that is axon. So what is an artificial neuron actually? In figure, various input to the network are represented by the mathematical symbols x1, x2 and x3. Each of these input is multiplied by a connected weight, and then a summation is being produced. In the simplest case, these products are summed, fed to a transfer function, that is activation function. A new term came, that is activation function, which will be discussed later. We just take it a summation on which an activation function is being formed to generate a result, and this result is sent as an output. So on summation, activation function is being put and an output is being generated. Now let us study about the basic structures or basic components of artificial neuron. The first one is a weighting factor. These are these weighting factors. A neuron usually receives many simultaneous inputs. Each input has its own relative weight. That is x1 w1, x2 will have relative weight w2 and x3 w3. W3. Alright, which gives the input the impact that it needs on the processing element summation function. These weights are responsible for giving the impact to the input. Weights are adaptive coefficients. What do you mean by adaptive? The thing holds a very much importance. Weights are termed to be adaptive, which means that weights keeps on changing. They are a measure of an input connection strength which can be modified in response to various training sets and according to our new network specific topology or its learning. That is, we can change weight according to the learning rule which we are following. So due to a learning rule, the weights can be modified. That is why the weights are termed as adaptive. So these are the weighting factors. This is the first component of an artificial neuron. The second component is summation function. The summation function, the inputs in the corresponding weights are the vectors which can be represented with the help of x1, x2, xn and w1, w2, wn. The total input signal will be the dot product of these two vectors. So keep in mind x1, x2, x3 and w1, w2 and w3 are vectors. So the summation of wn will be termed as the dot product of the weights and inputs respectively, and so on. In addition to summing, the summation function can select the minimum, maximum, majority, product or several normalizing algorithms. Some summation functions have an addition activation function, this term, which will be discussed later, applied to the result before it is passed to transfer function for the purpose of allowing the summation output to vary with respect to time. That is, some summation functions have an additional function which is applied to the result. This is the result before it is passed to the transfer function for the purpose of allowing the summation output to vary with respect to time. So this activation function is being applied to the result so that the output can vary with time. That is, varies with time. Activation function varies with time. That is, activation function when applied to result output is varied with time. This is a requirement. Alright. Now if we talk about the third component, that is transfer function. In the transfer function, the summation can be compared. Summation can be compared with some threshold to determine the neural output. If the sum is greater than the threshold value, the processing element generates a signal, and if it is less than threshold, no signal is being generated. So whereas we talk about the transfer function, that is a thing, this is a thing which we are studying. In transfer function, the summation is being compared by a threshold value according to which the output is being decided. The first thing we studied was weight factor, second is summation, third one is transfer function. Fourth one is scaling and limiting. After the transfer function, the result can pass through additional processes which is scaling and limiting. The scaling simplify the output. That is, it multiplies the scale factor times the transfer value and then adds an offset. That is, the output of an artificial neuron can be scaled and limited. Whereas in limiting, the mechanism which ensures that scaled result does not exceed an upper or lower bound. So scaling is followed by limiting. In scale, we scale the values, and limiting, which sees that the value isn't upper, lower than the desired value. Alright, so this was the fourth component. After weight factor, summation, transfer function, and the fourth one is scaling and limiting. Fifth one is output function. Each processing element is allowed one output signal. That is, one output is created, say OP. Alright, which may give it 100 of other neurons. This output is given to 100 of other neurons. First, there is a kind of a competition which goes on. First competition determines which artificial neuron would be active and provides an output. Second competitive input helps to determine which processing element would participate in learning or adaptation process. So as the output is given, the output is being passed to 100 of neurons, and then a competition takes place which have their respective works. The last one is, the last component of artificial neural network is error function. In most learning networks, the difference between current output and desired output is calculated as an error, which is then transformed by the error function to match a particular network architecture. The error is propagated backward to a previous layer. For example, this is an artificial neuron. You need a desired output for it. But if you get output say OP1 and the desired output for you was OP2, so the error can be calculated as and according to this error, an architecture will be designed which will be acted as a learning. It will be propagated to the initial layer. So these were some of the components of an artificial neuron. Another component can be the learning function, which we'll be considering afterwards. Now we were talking about activation functions. Let us see what they are. The activation function acts as a squashing function, such that the output of a neuron in a neural network is between certain value. So activation function actually acts as a squashing function, which sees if the output is within certain values. To make work more efficient and for exact output, some force or activation is being given. Like that, activation function is applied over a net input to calculate the output of an artificial neural network. So this was the thing which we studied in today's lecture. After this, we'll be studying neural networks and architectures of various neural networks. Thank you.